It's a racist cliche with deep roots in American history. The idea that black people can't swim.
Why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, Africans were masters of the sea, and boatmen from West Africa influenced American maritime trade. Still, from water stream stigmas and stereotypes.
Dodging the rain, having to feel like I can't go to the pool.
Like the perception of black beauty.
Why should like my hair have to be a factor in trying to have fun and create life experiences?
And the privatization of swimming lessons and pools. Tonight, we dive deep into the complex relationship people of color have with water on Race in Philly.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Race in Philly, the color of water. I'm Jacqueline London. The connection people of color have to water is one of enterprise, resistance, and survival. The myth that black people can't swim can be traced back to the Middle Passage, where Africans drowned themselves as a protest to slavery. But Africans' connection to the water traces back before European settlement in the Americas. NBC 10's Johnny Archer details that history and how Africans influenced American maritime trade.
It starts back in Africa. There was a lot of rituals and religions. They had deities called Orishas, so Obatala, Yemeya, Oshun. These were gods of rivers and bodies of water, and so there was a lot of ritual and respect connected to the water.
Oceans, rivers, and bodies of water have always been ingrained in the fabric of black culture. From Africa to the Americas, water became a passage from slavery.
The water, after it turns into this sacred space, this place of pain and trauma, we then see it turn into a place of freedom, because they also had people who were escaping through the same passage, the Middle Passage, escaping, moving back to Africa to start lives again.
Paul Best is a historical consultant for the Independent Seaport Museum in Philadelphia.
After freedom, we see enslaved Africans and freed Africans taking on jobs in maritime trade. And so in the early 1800s, America's shipping was booming exponentially. And at that time, about 100,000 men were sea workers, and a fifth of them, about 20,000, were black men.
Thanks to the Delaware River, Philadelphia became a rapidly growing city in the 1800s. It was black sea workers who took jobs as oystermen, boatmen, fishers, and whalers.
The role of sea work for black people turned into this foundation for our communities. The money that they used supported the homes, it supported black communities.
This was the home of James Fortin back in the early 1800s in the Society Hill section of Philadelphia at 3rd and Lombard. Fortin was a respected African-American sailmaker after the Revolutionary War, becoming a wealthy businessman, and played a role in freeing enslaved people during that time.
Here's an individual who's an incredibly successful businessman, making sales for the very, very, most expensive ships that were coming into Philadelphia.
Peter Siebert is the president and CEO at the Independent Seaport Museum, where they have an exhibit called The Tides of Freedom that tells the story of African presence on the Delaware River. And just hours before filming this story, the museum's curator found this rare document in a folder while looking for something else.
A document that is from James Fortin. It's a receipt for work that he did on the brig Emma. Now understand how rare that is. To my knowledge, there are 4 Fortin documents. Now there are 5.
A small piece of history discovered to help show a clearer picture of our past. Johnny Archer, NBC 10 News.
And leaders at the museum say they plan to expand the Tides of Freedom exhibit, telling the story of black people on the Delaware River and the first enslaved people brought into the region up until the late 20th century. Those forcefully brought and those who fled to the U.S. for hope of the American dream showed resilience and strength in their passage by water. Migrants risked everything to cross U.S. borders. As NBC 10 and Telemundo 62's Valeria Aponte Feliciano reports, water was on both sides of the journey.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
For more than 30 years, Saturnino Garrido has called Philadelphia home.
Nice to meet you.
He welcomed us at his house and talked to us about his life, why he left the Dominican Republic where he was born and lived for 25 years. Nate, the nickname his loved ones gave him, tells us he is one of the lucky ones.
It's very difficult. You see some people die.
Nate was close to death the first time he tried to come to the United States illegally after being denied a green card. With over 50 migrants, he got on a homemade wooden boat and left the Dominican Republic. After setting sail, his boat capsized due to bad weather. Throughout the years, thousands of immigrants have died in this journey through the Mona Passage, and Nate's journey wasn't the exception. He saw firsthand migrants drowning in the ocean.
A lot of people and the bad time, and it's difficult.
But he didn't give up. The second time, it was a smooth ride and the boat made it to Puerto Rico.
The water symbolizes for me life.
Water may be one of the causes why they are forced to migrate in two ways. It may be the lack of water, precisely. The dry season has impacted particular areas of both Central America and Mexico, and it's a cause why many migrate. And in other cases, it's the excess of water. Rainfalls, hurricanes that in some cases destroy their homes.
But like Elena tells us, arriving into the United States is not the end of their story. Now they begin a new chapter full of struggles and discrimination.
They call you wet, in Spanish mojado.
There are a lot of trauma that a lot of people that are crossing the border go through, even if they're successful. They see other people falling, staying behind, and there is nothing that they can do.
Nelly Jimenez with her organization Aclamo has helped many migrants adapt to life in the United States.
They want to belong, they want to be respected, they want to work.
Nate is one of those success stories. He became a police officer in Philadelphia and a United States citizen. I asked him if he would do it again. He said yes because of his family.
They better me now. They better me now.
Valeria Aponte Feliciano, NBC 10 News.
Nate said the water symbolizes life. After surviving a tumultuous journey across the water, people of color would soon find themselves in another sweeping current: access to pools.
The disparities faced against especially Black youth when it comes to not being able to swim or having substantially higher rates of mortality and things of that nature when it comes to drowning.
Next on Race in Philly, we visit the barriers created during Jim Crow, how it stripped many of their connection to water that local activists are fighting to get back. You're watching Race in Philly. Stay with us. How did Africans go from being water warriors to their American descendants having little to no swimming ability? The answer: barriers to access. According to the USA Swimming Foundation, 64% of African American children cannot swim. Compare that with the percentage of Hispanic and white children unable to swim, around 40%. The barriers to access have roots in Jim Crow segregation, where blacks were barred from public pools. After segregation ended, pools went private to make it harder for people of color without wealth to access them. In Philadelphia, public pools didn't go private, but as NBC 10's Claudia Vargas reports, barriers to access were based on where you lived.
Famed Philly swim coach Jim Ellis has been timing swimmers for decades.
I wanted to make a difference in the world. Swimming is what I knew, what I love.
Ellis founded PDR Swim Team in the 1970s at the Sayre Rec Center pool. His coaching achieved national fame,
Black kids from Philly became elite swimmers, ranking in the top 10 in the country. An exhibit of pool segregation at Philadelphia Waterworks includes some of Ellis's history.
When I started, it was 100% African American.
His program, which is now at the Salvation Army Kroc Center in Nicetown, Tioga, is no longer all black.
We have a lot of white folks here. We have a lot of Hispanics here. We have Asians here.
There aren't any city-run indoor pools left, and that, he says, is part of the reason why more city youth of color aren't involved in swimming.
Family can say, well, every Friday and Saturday we're going swimming at a pool that they know they'll enjoy being at. I think that makes a big difference.
The lack of access goes back to the Jim Crow era. Zinzi Harley is a curator at Philadelphia's African American Museum.
When it came to pools, the same was very true when it came to the Black community. And a lot of those folks were not able to access pools in their neighborhoods, possibly due to the fact that they were predominantly white institutions that were frequented by white community members that didn't want them in those spaces.
To this day, swimming is a predominantly white sport. Harley says that even once pools were racially integrated, other barriers existed.
Because of the lack of opportunity to learn how to do things like swim, there was no reason to go to the pool if you couldn't swim.
Today, the city's Parks and Rec department manages 70 outdoor pools throughout the city and offers swim lessons at the pools that are open. Keyword, open. As of August 1st, 25 of those pools were closed.
It was not a budget issue. It was purely staffing.
The city was short 85 lifeguards and 90 pool attendants for this season. The commissioner says her department decides which pools to open and close based on geography and equity.
Certainly paid attention to race, but most importantly, we paid attention to those communities where, again, there's a high heat vulnerability and a high crime level.
Still, we showed the commissioner the map where the majority of pools are closed, which are predominantly black and brown communities.
So if you look at this map, you'll see that the pool distribution is not equal throughout the city.
She went on to say that North Philly has a larger concentration of pools and therefore more closures. Still, that leaves areas like 12th and Cambria and 21st and Cecil B. Moore without a pool. The closures have impacted communities all over the city, including Olney, where Gilbert Evans has lived for decades.
The pool was always open.
But Zeeler Pool has been shut down since the summer of 2020. He worries about the teens in the neighborhood.
I think with the pool being open, it would keep a lot of them out of trouble.
Keeping youth away from crime and gangs was one of Jim Ellis's goals when he first started his swim program. Then it became a pipeline of not just elite swimmers, but city lifeguards.
70s, the 80s, and 90s, we were turning out kids that wanted to be lifeguards because they swam all year round. It became a way of life.
Claudia Vargas, NBC 10 News.
At least a dozen public pools in Philadelphia have since closed for the season. The last will close September 7th. The fight to overcome those barriers to pool access needed trailblazers like Jim Ellis. And he wasn't in this fight alone. The first Black-owned swim club in the country also happened to be just outside Philadelphia. The Nile Swim Club fostered opportunities that otherwise would not have been available to African Americans, helping families defy stereotypes and reconnect future generations to the love for water.
Look at Simone Manuel! Simone Manuel is really turning on the gas here, and Manuel is going to do it! Oh!
Two-time Olympian Simone Manuel, 2 golds, 2 silvers, 1 bronze. At the 2016 Olympics in Rio, she made history, becoming the first Black American woman to win an individual Olympic gold in swimming. A wave of emotion for this moment and all that it means.
It's definitely been a long journey these past 4 years, and I'm just so blessed.
As a Black athlete in the sport of swimming, I am a minority, and coming up in the ranks of swimming wasn't always easy for me. I often felt like I didn't belong because there weren't many other Black swimmers like myself.
Look at Cullen Jones up in lane 2, second from the top.
Cullen Jones, a 4-time Olympic medalist and first African American to hold a world record in swimming.
And it's Jones and Irvin, 1-2.
Cullen Jones started taking swimming lessons after nearly drowning at Dorney Park when he was just 5 years old.
I lost consciousness. I was drowning.
Lifeguards gave me CPR to save my life. I coughed up a pint of water before I took my first breath.
Both Manuel and Jones breaking records and smashing stereotypes.
Why are black men or black people not good swimmers? Because they don't have the buoyancy.
Oh, it may just be that they don't have access to all the country clubs and the pools.
The infamous remarks made by Al Campanis, former general manager of the Dodgers, in a 1987 network interview. With a history over the years of exclusion of blacks from swimming pools and clubs, Olympian Cullen Jones is making sure children in black communities have the resources to learn how to swim with an initiative called Make a Splash.
Take a deep breath, a little air out of your nose, ready, set. You ask any child if they want to be near the water, their hands shoot up. But the second question that I always ask is, how many of you guys have had swim lessons? And then you see those hands start to drop.
The Nile Swim Club of Yeadon, just outside Philadelphia, has a similar goal and surfaced when blacks were denied access to other pools.
And instead of those members fighting and protesting to join that swim club, they came back to our community and said, let's open our own swim club. And in 1959, the Nile Swim Club of Yeadon was opened.
The Nile became the nation's first private swim club owned and operated by African Americans.
They came back to this community, raised the money, got bonds, mortgaged their houses, bought this 4.5 acres of land for us to swim here. And that's why it's so near and dear to me.
For John Gross, the Nile Swim Club is part of the fabric of his family.
We grew up learning how to swim, so when I got out and people started making jokes about like black people are scared of the pool, I'm like, no, we swim in my neighborhood.
Had it not been for them in Delaware County, we wouldn't have been able or have the privilege to swim and be a part of a community such as this, where we can enjoy ourselves.
And for their daughter, they say the representation all around her matters.
It's important for her to see what we want her to become.
And as long as we're provided access, we'll continue to flourish.
Flourishing and fighting to the finish, knowing victory means so much more than the sport, and showing swimming has no color.
Before we go to break, did you know that Philadelphia is home to the only black rowing team in U.S. sports? Here's a look at BLJ Community Rowing, breaking barriers one stroke at a time. You can learn more at NBC10.com/RacinPhilly.
Next on Racing Philly, barriers to the water become skin deep.
And I just think just because, for lack of a better word, brainwashed with society and media and movies and how we're supposed to look.
How the American beauty standard has kept many black people away from water, and the move to reclaim that connection by embracing natural beauty.
While we've witnessed the success of people of color when they immerse themselves in water for years and still to this day, many have aversions to it because of the impact moisture has on hair. Many women prefer not to get into the pool and often avoid workouts. That's because water can cause straightened or processed hair to curl back into its natural state, which for a long period of time wasn't considered socially acceptable. A recent Nielsen report shows blacks spend nearly 9 times more than their counterparts on hair and beauty products. The report shows $1.2 trillion is spent annually, and that doesn't include weaves, extensions, or styling appliances. NBC 10's Leah Uko shows us how embracing natural beauty restores the rites of passage to the water.
I took that shower cap off and my hair was like, "Foop."
I go get baptized. They dip me in the water. I come out and you already know.
The end result in both these stories was our straightened hair reverted back to afros once the strands touched water. Water is life's most essential resource, but in most Black American communities, it has not always been valued.
And I just think just because, for lack of a better word, brainwashed with society and media and movies and how we're supposed to look.
Raza Hair Salon in Germantown styles mostly natural hair that's locked, twisted, or has loose kinks and curls.
It's definitely good to see the movement happening with natural hair and women embracing their natural hair.
Stylist Elena Sewell, Letitia Barnes, and others spend a great deal of time debunking myths. Black hair cannot get wet.
Oh, do you want to braid?
In fact,
Yes.
while styling my wet locks, Barnes explains when my hair is sported in its natural state, it needs water daily. Otherwise, dryness can cause breakage.
It kind of sounds funny because we've been born with this hair, you know what I mean? But we never actually got the training like, oh, what do I do with it?
The lack of knowledge about black hair dates back as early as the 1600s. Slave masters viewed African hair as unruly, unsightly, unmanageable. To thrive, black women and men would straighten their hair. This practice was passed down generations, but has been shifting.
But nowadays, you know, with dreads being big again, twists, individuals, locks, you see a lot more of that going on.
Barber and cosmetologist Jalen Thompson says clients and himself have cut ties with old age perceptions.
At one point I had pink hair or white hair, so like I wasn't afraid of the social norm of what a man could and couldn't do with his hair.
Come on. Less manipulation to black natural hair also allows trainers like Sheena Olin time to focus more on her physical health.
One of the main excuses for missing a session or rescheduling a session or not starting when they said they wanted to start and maybe pushing it to a different date to start is, oh girl, I got a hair appointment. I gotta, I don't want to start out my hair.
The professional bodybuilder has competed in shows, one of which she won, rocking her mane in natural styles, which she says was a risk in an industry that historically awards women wearing their hair straight.
I definitely recognize a shift. There are a lot more competitors that are wearing their hair more naturally curly or with the faux locks or with, the twists. And it does show the culture, I think, on a professional level, the HR level, the executive level, there has to be change there.
Until then, they all say they'll continue to unlearn falsehoods about their hair and embrace how it grows.
It's 4 of them back here.
Naturally.
Why should my hair have to be a factor in trying to have fun and create life experiences?
Leah Uko, NBC 10 News.
Still ahead, a final word on how, despite the trauma rooted for people of color and water, it is the very thing that binds us. We'll be right back. From our humanity to our health, not drinking enough water could lead to life-altering diseases that disproportionately affect people of color. NBC 10's Erin Coleman speaks with a woman with a message.
Physically drained and exhausted. That's how Lola Caldwell says she feels every time she's wheeled out of this room.
No one told me that my life would be basically cut in half, all the things that I could do.
Lola just spent 3.5 hours on a dialysis machine. She's been doing this 3 days a week for 7 years.
I know it's saving my life until a kidney comes along, but, sometimes I feel at what cost.
Dr. Amara Dissanayake is a nephrologist at Einstein Medical Center.
We shouldn't be at a point where treating kidney disease. We should be at a point of preventing kidney disease.
That includes exercising, eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, and drinking plenty of water, something the city of Philadelphia has been pushing for years.
One of the places where we as the health department have done a lot of work is in conjunction with the school district in schools, because studies have shown that even mild dehydration affects children's ability to learn.
In 2017 and 2018, the health department did a study in conjunction with Philadelphia Parks and Recreation to see what would happen if they replaced the old water fountains with these new hydration stations that keep the water chilled, and the results were staggering.
We found that water consumption doubled just with the introduction of this newer, higher quality water fountain.
Right now, 37 million Americans have chronic kidney disease. And according to the National Kidney Foundation, Black or African Americans are more than 3 times as likely to have kidney failure than white Americans.
The numbers for Hispanics or Latinos, American Indians, and Asian Americans are higher as well. Why? Because minority populations have higher rates of diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and high blood pressure, all of which can increase your risk for kidney disease.
We need to learn to speak up and share what's going on with us, because you never know. Somebody might be going through the same thing and not knowing what it is.
Erin Coleman, NBC 10 News.
Connect with us by visiting NBC10.com/RaceInPhilly. There you can find a list of community resources mentioned during this program. Though the connection people of color have with water is complex, it was a place they looked for freedom, whether it was income, a route along the Underground Railroad, or Africans who drowned themselves refusing to be enslaved. Descendants of the African diaspora and of other immigrants honor the bravery, resilience, and determination of those ancestors by tearing down stigmas and stereotypes. In closing, we honor the memory of the ancestors who chose the sea. Thank you for joining us.